The emergence of filial piety marked the beginning of a path of human evolution fundamentally different from that of any other animal on Earth. It also signified the gradual formation of the family among our human ancestors. Bound together by kinship, multiple generations began living as a family, no longer separating easily because of hunger or hardship. Family members were united by blood ties, each fulfilling their own responsibilities and cooperating to ensure the family's survival and prosperity. As a result, human knowledge, experience, and culture could be passed down from one generation to the next, accumulating continuously over countless generations until humanity eventually entered the age of civilization. As human civilization developed, methods of production advanced steadily. Simple tools made of stone and wood gradually evolved into more sophisticated bronze and iron agricultural implements. Human ancestors constructed irrigation systems, invented techniques for diverting water to farmland, and improved agricultural productivity. They maintained soil fertility by using organic fertilizers such as animal manure and green manure, while increasing crop yields through intensive cultivation, weeding, and crop rotation. At the same time, they domesticated and raised animals, securing a stable supply of meat. Large animals such as oxen and horses were widely used for plowing fields, transporting goods, and powering mills, greatly improving labor efficiency. The continuous improvement of productive methods further promoted the division of labor and increased productivity, resulting in a steady growth of material wealth. Once production exceeded the level required for basic survival, surplus wealth began to accumulate. This surplus gradually became an object of competition and control by those with power, giving rise to the institution of private property. The emergence of private property was another major milestone in human social evolution, second only to the emergence of filial piety. It greatly stimulated people's motivation to work by allowing their talents, intelligence, and creativity to be fully expressed. Those who achieved greater success through their labor could acquire more wealth and attain higher social status. Moreover, when surplus wealth was concentrated in the hands of individuals capable of creating additional wealth, it often led to further economic development, generating even greater prosperity for society as a whole. In a society based on private property, people naturally differ in their family backgrounds, attitudes toward life, opportunities, abilities, and talents. Consequently, differences in wealth and social status emerge, leading to the formation of distinct social classes. Human beings are naturally inclined to compare themselves with others. This competitive instinct can inspire ambition, encourage diligence, and serve as an important driving force behind social progress. However, when there is a wide gap between a person's abilities and desires, feelings of disappointment, resentment, and dissatisfaction with reality are likely to arise. As such discontent accumulates and spreads among increasing numbers of individuals or groups, social tensions intensify, ultimately creating the conditions for civil unrest and even war. The ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius once said, "Wealth and honor are what all people desire, but if they cannot be obtained by the proper way, one should not accept them. Poverty and lowliness are what all people dislike, but if they cannot be avoided by the proper way, one should not escape them." This statement expresses the moral principle that benevolent and upright people should follow. The pursuit of wealth and status is natural, but they must be acquired through just and honorable means. Likewise, one should not abandon moral integrity merely to escape poverty or humiliation. In a society based on private property, as material wealth continues to increase, achieving a reasonably fair distribution of wealth becomes an important issue for maintaining social stability. Society should both respect and reward those whose labor creates great value for the nation and recognize the contributions of ordinary workers. Only by balancing efficiency and fairness can social tensions be reduced and long-term stability be promoted. However, social harmony cannot be maintained by institutions alone. More important is the establishment of a shared cultural identity and common moral standards. Through education rooted in traditional culture, citizens can develop sound values and intellectual judgment, enabling people to understand one another, respect one another, and live together harmoniously, thereby reducing hatred and conflict. Hatred not only breeds social unrest but is also a major source of war. Private property has greatly promoted the development of productive forces and the flourishing of material civilization. Yet human history also shows that wars fought over wealth, power, and interests have often destroyed the achievements accumulated over long periods of civilization. War brings enormous loss of life and property and remains one of the greatest obstacles to the continued progress of human civilization. Therefore, if humanity wishes to continue creating and enjoying greater material prosperity, it must first avoid war as much as possible, and avoiding war requires mutual trust, cooperation, and a shared moral foundation among people. This moral foundation is rooted in filial piety. Filial piety is a virtue cultivated gradually through traditional family education and represents the earliest practice of benevolence. Confucius' disciple Yuzi said, "It is rare for a person who is filial toward his parents and respectful toward his elder brothers to be inclined to offend his superiors, and a person who does not offend his superiors is unlikely to stir up rebellion." He also said, "Filial piety and fraternal respect are the root of benevolence." In other words, a person who honors parents and respects elders is generally more likely to respect others and observe social order, and from this attitude the virtue of benevolence naturally develops. It was filial piety that enabled human ancestors to form stable families, establish mechanisms of intergenerational cooperation and cultural transmission, and embark on a path of evolution different from that of all other animals, ultimately leading humanity into civilized society. After the rise of private property and the growth of material civilization, filial piety continued to play an irreplaceable role in maintaining social order, preserving cultural traditions, and sustaining social stability. The ancient Chinese primer three-character classic begins with the lines, "At the beginning of life, human nature is inherently good, people's natures are similar, but habits make them different. If there is no proper education, one's nature will change." These words clearly emphasize the importance of early family education. Good family upbringing not only teaches children to honor their parents and respect their elders, but also helps them identify with the finest values of their nation's cultural tradition, develop a proper sense of right and wrong, and cultivate responsibility, thereby laying a solid foundation for their future participation in society. Every society inevitably contains a variety of ideas and values. While respecting freedom of speech, education should help young people develop independent thinking and rational judgment, so that they can evaluate different viewpoints, inherit the traditions that contribute to social stability, family harmony, and national development, and avoid being easily influenced by extremist ideologies or one-sided opinions. Only in this way can society preserve stable families, strengthen social cohesion, and promote the healthy development of democratic institutions and the rule of law. The capitalist democratic system of the United States has produced world-leading economic strength and technological innovation and has attracted countless people from around the world to study, work, and live there. Traditional American values, such as respect for the rule of law, individual initiative, family responsibility, liberty, and democracy, have long provided essential support for the nation's development. Therefore, preserving and transmitting these valuable cultural traditions, continually improving democratic institutions, and maintaining social unity remain important foundations for the continued prosperity of the United States. If the United States wishes to preserve the vitality of its democratic institutions and the prosperity of its society, it should cherish and pass on the traditional values that strengthen stable families, social cohesion, the rule of law, and the virtues of hard work and perseverance. These values should continue to serve as an essential foundation for the nation's long-term development.